The rain was relentless that night, hammering against the windshield of my car as I navigated the winding roads leading back to our estate in Seattle. I had been away for 3 weeks in Chicago, settling the complex legal affairs of my late father's business. It was a grueling trip, but the thought of coming home to my husband, Arthur, kept me going. Arthur was 68, 5 years older than me, and had been battling advanced dementia for the last 3 years. He was the love of my life, a man who once built skyscrapers but now struggled to remember how to tie his shoes. Leaving him was the hardest thing I ever had to do, but I had no choice. I had left him in the care of the one person I trusted more than anyone else in the world, our 28-year-old daughter, Bella, and her fiancé, Ethan. I pulled up to the iron gates of our home, expecting to see the warm glow of the porch lights. Instead, the house stood like a dark, ominous fortress against the stormy sky. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. It was only 7 in the evening. The house should have been alive with light. I parked the car and ran through the rain to the front door, my keys fumbling in my shaking hands. When I stepped inside, the silence was deafening. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, stale, and smelled faintly of something rotting. "Bella? Ethan?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty hallway. No answer. I dropped my bags and rushed to the living room. Arthur usually sat there at this hour watching old Western movies. The TV was off. The furniture was covered in a layer of dust that shouldn't have been there after just 3 weeks. Panic began to claw at my throat. I ran upstairs to our bedroom, then to the guest rooms. Empty. The beds were made, untouched. Then I heard it, a low rhythmic scratching sound. It was faint, barely audible over the rain, but it was coming from the back of the house near the old sunroom we had converted into a storage area for garden supplies. I sprinted down the stairs, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The door to the sunroom was reinforced heavy oak, and to my horror, I saw a heavy-duty industrial padlock secured on the outside hasp. Why would anyone lock the garden storage from the outside? "Arthur!" I screamed, pounding on the wood. From the other side, a weak, broken whimper replied, "Help! Cold!" The sound of his voice, so frail and terrified, shattered me. I didn't have the key. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the heavy fire extinguisher from under the sink, and returned to the door. With a primal scream, I smashed the extinguisher against the lock. Once, twice. On the third strike, the wood around the hasp splintered and the lock fell away. I yanked the door open. The smell hit me first: ammonia, sweat, and despair. The room was uninsulated and freezing, the temperature matching the cold autumn night outside there. Curled up on a pile of old rugs in the corner was Arthur. He was wearing the same pajamas I had left him in 3 weeks ago, now stained and tattered. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken into his skull, shivering violently. He looked at me, but there was no recognition in his eyes, only pure, unadulterated fear. He recoiled as I reached for him, thinking I was there to hurt him. "It's me, Arthur. It's Sarah. I'm here," I sobbed, wrapping my coat around his trembling frame. He was light, dangerously light. I managed to lift him. He had wasted away to almost nothing. I carried him to the car, ignoring the rain, and sped to the nearest emergency room, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, tears blurring my vision. The doctors at the hospital were horrified. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, and early stages of hypothermia. The attending physician told me that another 2 days in that cold room would have killed him. As Arthur slept, hooked up to IV fluids, I sat in the waiting room, consumed by a mixture of relief and a dark, burning rage. I called Bella's phone straight to voicemail. I called Ethan. Disconnected. I needed answers. I left Arthur in the care of the nurses and drove back to the house, transforming from a worried wife into a detective. I needed to know why my daughter, the girl I had raised with nothing but love, had tortured her father. Inside the house, I went straight to the home office. Bella had been staying in the guest suite, but her laptop was sitting on the kitchen island, plugged in as if she had just stepped away. She had always been careless with passwords. Using her birthday, I typed it in, and the screen flickered to life. What I found in the next hour made me physically ill. Open on the browser was a flight itinerary. 2 one-way tickets to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, departing tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. But that was just the beginning. I opened her email and found correspondence with the shady notary public. There were scanned documents attached, a power of attorney form with Arthur's signature. I zoomed in. It was a shaky, forced scrawl. They had forced my confused, dementia-ridden husband to sign away control of his assets. I logged into our joint bank accounts. The screen showed a balance of 0. Our retirement savings, Arthur's medical fund, the emergency account, all of it, totaling nearly $400,000, had been wired out 3 days ago to a holding company I didn't recognize. Then I checked the property title records online. There was a pending sale on our vacation cabin in Aspen, sold for half its value for a quick cash payout. Then I found the folder labeled Project Rio. Inside were photos of a luxury villa in Brazil and chats between Bella and Ethan. He's so annoying. He keeps asking for water. Bella had written 10 days ago. Ethan's reply, just put him in the back room. He won't last long anyway. Once the transfer clears, we are gone. The old man is just baggage. Bella, Mom isn't back for another week. We have time. Just make sure the door is locked so he doesn't wander. They hadn't just neglected him. They had discarded him like trash to fund a permanent vacation. They viewed his death not as a tragedy, but as a convenience that would speed up their inheritance. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I felt a cold steel resolve settle in my chest. I picked up the phone and dialed the local police precinct, asking for the major crimes unit. When the detectives arrived, I showed them everything. The laptop, the forged documents, the emails, and the photos of the sunroom where Arthur had been kept prisoner. The lead detective, a stern woman named Miller, looked at the chat logs and her jaw tightened. "This is attempted murder, Mrs. Vance," she said quietly, "and grand larceny. Where are they now?" "Their flight leaves in 6 hours," I said, pointing to the screen. "They are likely at a hotel near the airport." The police moved fast. They tracked Ethan's cell phone signal to a high-end hotel just 3 miles from the international terminal. I didn't go with them. I went back to the hospital to hold Arthur's hand. But Detective Miller called me at 4 a.m. "We got them," she said. "They were in the lobby, checking out. They had 4 suitcases and $200,000 in cash plus bearer bonds." I later learned that when the police handcuffed Bella, she screamed for me. She screamed that it was all a mistake, that she was just watching him. But the evidence on the laptop was a nail in her coffin. The trial took place 6 months later. Arthur was physically better, but the trauma had accelerated his mental decline. He no longer spoke much, often staring out the window. Flinching at loud noises, I sat in the front row of the courtroom, watching the girl I used to read bedtime stories to sitting in a prisoner's jumpsuit. Bella tried to play the victim. Her lawyer argued that Ethan was controlling, that she was manipulated. But then the prosecution played the voicemail she had left on her own phone, reminders she recorded for herself. "Check transfer status. Don't feed Dad until he signs the second paper." The jury gasped. There was no manipulation. She was the architect. She was tired of waiting for us to die so she could have our money. Ethan turned on her immediately, testifying that the plan to lock Arthur in the freezing sunroom was Bella's idea, because she didn't want to deal with his incontinence while I was away. He admitted to everything in exchange for a 20-year sentence. When it was Bella's turn to speak, she looked at me. "Mom, please," she wept. "I'm your daughter." I stood up, my legs shaking, and requested to read my victim impact statement. I looked her in the eye and said, "The daughter I raised died the moment she decided her father's suffering was a price worth paying for a villa in Brazil. You aren't my daughter. You are a stranger who broke into my home and tortured my husband." The judge was merciless. Bella was sentenced to 25 years in prison for elder abuse, kidnapping, and fraud. As the bailiffs led her away, she screamed my name, but I didn't look back. I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. Life is different now. The house is quiet. I hired a professional nurse to help with Arthur because I can no longer trust family. We managed to recover most of the money, though the cabin was lost. But money doesn't matter. What matters is that every night I tuck Arthur into bed, I turn on the nightlight, and I leave the door wide open so he knows he is never, ever trapped again. The betrayal left a scar that will never heal. But as I hold Arthur's hand, I know that love, real love, is about protecting the vulnerable, even when it demands the hardest sacrifices. I lost a daughter, but I saved the man who matters most, and that is the only victory I need.